Shalom. This week we are reading Parashat Lech Lecha, beginning in Sefer Bereshit, the book of Genesis, chapter 12, and we're introduced to the character of Avraham. God changes his name soon to Avraham. He is the father of the Jewish people, the first of the patriarchs, the greatest tzaddik, the righteous pillar of the world, lived at a time when the entire world was totally involved in all sorts of idolatry, and he was the one person who called the world to an understanding, a recognition of the fact that there's really only one creator, one true God. And that, of course, is the destiny of the Jewish people, to cry out the presence of God in the world, to introduce the whole world, all of humanity, to who our Father in heaven really is, and to serve together the one true God. So that's really the legacy that Abraham bequeathed to the Jewish people. He was totally unique in the world, just as God is totally unique, and so God identified with him, really, that both of them are kind of one and to themselves. It wasn't so simple for Avraham, for Abraham, to do this, to start, to foment this spiritual revolution. He actually came from a home that was not, as you could say, religiously observant, was not a traditional Jewish home, just as many Jewish people who find themselves, who connect later on in life with their Jewish identity, are penitents, they are balei tshuva, they come from homes that weren't so scrupulous about Jewish observance. So it's quite famous, this midrashic teaching, that Abraham really came from a house that was pretty, you could say, modern at the time. It was actually quite free-thinking, not at all along the lines of the orthodoxy that he adopted, because Abraham's father was a well-known idolater, was actually an idol salesman. It's how he made his living. And there's a very, very famous and oft-cited midrash about a certain kind of clash between Avraham and his father, a certain very highly charged moment when Avraham decided to throw caution to the wind and face off with his father, Terah, the well-known idol salesman. And what happened then was really quite startling. And this midrash is so famous, I think a lot of people are aware of it, but I'd like to share it with you really word for word, for us to really examine what this midrashic teaching from the Midrash Rabbah on Book of Genesis really shows us about Abraham, about Terah, his father, about their relationship, and about the nature of the desire, as it were, or the force that's in the world even today to worship idols. What's that all about? Because, maybe people don't bow down to stone today, but they still bow down to all sorts of things. And idolatry is still pretty rampant in the world. So let's look at this midrash together. It's pretty amazing. It says, Terah, who was Avraham's father, was an idol maker. One time he had to travel. And so he left his son Avraham in charge of the store to sell, to be the salesman. People would come to buy. And I guess this was a showroom of the latest in idols, whatever was the leading rage in idols at that time. And Avraham would say to them, to each customer, he would say, "Tell me, how old are you?" And the person would answer, 50 or 60, let's say. And Avraham would say, "Whoa, I really pity you, because you're here 60 years old, and you want to bow down to something made of stone that was just created today." And the potential buyer would be embarrassed and would leave. One time, a woman came in with a plate of flour that she wanted to offer as a meal to one of these gods. So she said to Avraham, "Here, could you please take this and offer it in front of the gods? See which one will eat it." So after she left, Avraham took a huge club and he broke all the idols in the store except for the largest one. And into the hands of this largest idol, he placed the club. And then his father came home. And his father said, "What happened here?" And Avraham said, "Look, I can't hide it from you. A woman came in and she was bringing an offering of flour, and she told me to give it to them, and they began fighting amongst themselves, the idols, each one saying, 'I want to eat it first, I want to eat it first.' And the biggest one took this club and broke all of them and said, 'No, I'm going to eat the flour. So Terach, Abraham's father, said to him, what are you trying to pull here? Trying to take me for a fool? Do they have any sort of mind? Do you think that they can think that you're telling me such a thing? They're not real. So Avraham said to his father, and he was really just a little boy at the time, he said to him, why don't you listen to what you're saying? Why don't you listen to your own voice? So then the Midrash tells us that Terach did something which is pretty hard to relate to, pretty hard for us to believe could happen. But Terach, Abraham's father, gave the boy over to the authorities, the idolatry police, as it were, of the wicked Nimrod, himself the greatest king at the time, who made himself really into a god. And I guess Terach here, sensing that the opposition that Avraham was going to be mounting towards the convention of society and the consensus was so great, that Terach did something that would appear to us to be quite unfatherly, and he handed over his own son to Nimrod. So Nimrod took Avraham and said, I want you to bow down to this fire. He lit a fire and he said, I want you to bow down to the fire. Avraham said, well, maybe we should bow down to water, because water puts out the fire. So Nimrod said, okay, bow down to the water. But Avraham said, well, maybe we should bow down to the clouds, because the clouds carry the water. So Nimrod said, okay, bow down to the clouds. But Avraham said, well, maybe we should bow down to the wind, because the wind scatters the clouds. So Nimrod said, fine, bow down to the wind. But then Avraham said, maybe we should bow down to man, because man is able to withstand the wind. And finally, Nimrod said, and it's really interesting when we read the Midrash verbatim, Nimrod said these words, Lam atam marbeh b'diburim, you're talking too much. Why are you talking too much? Me personally, I only bow down to fire, Nimrod said, so I'm throwing you into the fire. And actually, another Midrash tells us that when Nimrod threw Avraham into this fiery furnace, the angel Gabriel, who is associated in tradition with coming along and saving one in the nick of time, the angel Gabriel came before the Holy One, blessed be He, and said, Master of the universe, let me go down now and save this righteous person from the fiery furnace. But the Holy One, blessed be He, answered the angel Gabriel, and he said, I am totally unique in this world, and so is Avraham totally unique in my world. I'm going to go and save him myself, which according to the Midrash is exactly what happened. So not only is it a great mystery to us to understand the attitude of Terach, Abraham's father, but who it seems was willing to give over his child to be killed by Nimrod, but also look at the conversation between Nimrod and Avraham. Avraham refused to bow down to each thing, and so Nimrod said, okay, so bow down to that. And Avraham also beat out that with his logic, and Nimrod said, so bow down to this. All it seemed important to Nimrod was just bow down to something, bow down to anything, except this one God. Just, okay, bow down to the wind, bow down to the water, bow down to something. Because the whole purpose of that direction, of that mindset, of that challenge to the authority of God is just, it doesn't matter what you bow down to, as long as you deny that there's really only one God, that there's a purpose to the universe, that there is a reason for creation, that there's a goal of life, that there's sanctity, that there's a reason. Just bow down to anything. You know, the Midrash tells us that ultimately Terach, Abraham's father, repented and died a righteous man. There have been many Jews all throughout history that went down into, so to speak, the fiery furnace for the sake of the sanctification of the name of the one God, and they didn't come out. But collectively, the Jewish people are still here. Collectively, the Jewish people always come out as a nation, because Abraham, by his descent and ascent from the fiery furnace, bequeathed to his descendants, the people of Israel, this attribute, this collective inherited quality to be able to be in that fire and come out and sanctify the name of God. And the idolaters of the world today, just as it was in the time of Nimrod, their whole idea is just tell us that you'll bow down to something. It doesn't matter what, as long as it's not to this idea of the one God. And so today as well, the thorn in the side of the idolaters of the world, those who seek to deny that there is a purpose and a reason and a beauty in creation, and that man must rise above the elements and seek out the presence of God and sanctify His name, their whole thing is just deny it and we'll be happy. And the Jew is not able to do that, just as Abraham was not able to do that, because our father Abraham bequeathed to us as this legacy, this purpose, this destiny, that we must rise up and declare to the whole world that there's only one God.